Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez, welcoming you back to our ongoing podcast series on this thing called leadership. And as always, by way of introduction, my guest is currently the managing director of Hodyl Co. Can I welcome to the podcast Leanne Hodyl? How are you, Leanne?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here. So let's start where I always start with these podcasts, Leanne, by asking, in which industry was your first leadership role and why did you take that role on?
So it's the same industry I'm in now, which is urban design and planning. So it wasn't technically a leadership role, but I took a leadership role on a project. So I was working for a large design firm in Sydney and they won a big project up in Darwin. So it was in my late 20s. So I started flying up to Darwin every fortnight with my manager and eventually started taking that on myself. So it was helping manage the planning process to do a massive redesign of a parkland, about $70 million project. And suddenly I found myself, attending meetings on my own and representing the company and representing the design quality of the project.
Well, there you go. Nothing like a $70 million project to keep you focused on getting the outcome
Absolutely.
achieved.
Yeah.
That's great. And so in that, I guess in that respect, and given that you were given that responsibility early in your career, as you've developed as a leader, what have you found has been the difference, if any, between the leadership function and management function?
I probably didn't know it back then because it was a trial by fire and I was learning on the day-to-day job, and still obviously had support from my director at the time. But I think over more of the last kind of 15 years, I've learned that they're actually, I think they're quite fundamentally different things, leadership and management. So leadership to me is more about perhaps setting the overall direction or a vision for an organization or maybe even like a cause, and then actually motivating people to follow that and actually giving a sense of the possible and how you get there. Whereas management, I think, is actually about mobilizing the resources or the people to actually make it happen, to actually really facilitate the actions that you need to make happen to get to that vision. How
do you engage with a mistake that's attributed to you as a leader, Leanne?
Hopefully fairly graciously. So, I think mistakes are just, everyone makes mistakes. I'm actually not that worried about making mistakes. You hope they're not too embarrassing or too public, but I guess I just accept them, to be honest, and actually try and learn from them, try and laugh about them if you can, try and retrieve them back to some sort of success if you can. But I'm quite skeptical, I guess, if somebody says they don't make mistakes. So I think it's a pretty normal thing to do. I think actually, as I've got older, I've learned that it's actually just make them. Don't worry about it too much.
What do you find is the most difficult part of being a leader?
I think for me, on a very personal level, I'm an introvert. So I think like being a leader is about getting out there a lot and being in front of people and having the energy to do that. So I've just been reading a good book about it actually called Quiet, which is about being an introvert, a leader and an introvert. So I think just sort of finding your own way through that you don't actually have to kind of go out bells and whistles all the time. It's okay to just sort of lead in your own style and accept that actually you need a lot of your own time to sort of get your ideas together. I think the other thing for me is actually just balancing also sort of rational thinking with empathy. When I get very stressed, my empathy levels go down and I just want to get stuff done. And that's often actually when your team needs you to be most empathetic. So that collision of those two things, I think, is often very challenging.
How do you measure success as a leader, mate?
It's a great question, actually, because I probably haven't given this enough thought. But I think if you think about the role of leadership is to set a direction or a vision and try and motivate people to follow it. I think that the degree to which you actually impact others, either because they do agree to follow you and join what you're doing, or if it's someone in your team and they're working for you, they're loyal and they're actually passionate about the vision you've created. But also then actually how much you actually, like in my industry, urban design and planning, it's actually how much I'm influencing the industry as well, like how much I'm actually shaping the industry in the direction that it's going.
So let's move on to a couple of statements here. On the job experience develops better leaders. What are your thoughts on that, Leanne?
I think that can be true. I think it depends what sort of experience you're getting, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience. I think it very much depends on how self-aware the person is. So, and how they're learning. So I've had, good managers and leaders that I've worked for and bad ones. And I think you can learn from both. So, but I think you have to be paying a lot of attention and reflecting on it quite a lot, which I think does help to be an introvert then, because probably you do that in a more natural, comes to you more naturally. So yeah, I think on the job experience is actually critical. I don't think you can probably become a leader just sitting on your own and not engaging with the world.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with that. Okay, let's move on to formal education helps to develop better leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, again, I guess it depends on the quality of the formal education. I mean, in my career, I've definitely been given the opportunity to do some like leadership training courses, and I've always taken something out of them. Like they've been focused on different things, like whether it's, say, mental health in the workplace, or supporting diversity in the workplace, or setting clear strategic directions for your team and stuff. I've always taken something out of them, but I don't think they're everything. I definitely think you need on-the-job experience as well.
Okay, almost like a continuum. Yeah, that's a fair call. Okay, Leanne, so can you tell me what your thoughts are on the following? Leaders are born, not made.
I think that's partially true, but not completely true. I think that there are definitely some probably personal attributes that people are born with that might lead them to become leaders. Like if they're, for example, naturally curious or ambitious, or perhaps even organized, then I think that can help. But I think there's also lots of things that people can learn, and that can be things like skills, like communication skills, strategic thinking, or even learning like how to have a greater sense of self-awareness, I think is something that can be learned. Or what your moral compass is. I think that's can be a very learned thing as well.
Oh wow, okay, that one's different again. What understanding yourself and trying to find that center can be a difficult thing as a leader.
A huge part of being a leader is actually leading people, and I think that some of the skills that are equally important and perhaps not often given enough attention are things like empathy, which is, I think you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're not empathetic about other people's experience, I don't think you'll be a great leader. So I think they're critical, but they're complementary to other skills as well.
Okay, so here's the final question, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this. What might you say to a younger version of yourself about being an effective leader?
Gosh, I'd probably say exactly the same thing that I say to myself right now, which is probably just to relax and actually enjoy it more. Like it's not actually, like we put leadership on a kind of the concept of leadership on a pedestal, and I think we make it sound something that's quite hard to achieve. But actually, I think everyone's, like a lot of people are leaders in their own world, whether it's a leader of a family or a community group or whatever it is. I think actually just let yourself be and don't be so harsh on yourself, and just just let your natural personality, I think, come out as a leader. There's not one idea of what a leader is, just actually let yourself enjoy it and grow into it.
And on that exceptionally positive note, this has been Eric Perez, your podcast host, and I'd like to thank Leanne for her time. Thank you, Leanne.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and I'll catch you all on the next podcast.